Well, welcome to the second of our videos looking at how I work my way through text as I prepare to preach it. We're looking at the second half of John chapter 15, following on from what we saw last time, how we are branches and we need to be vitally connected to Jesus the vine if we hope to survive and thrive and bring glory to God our Father. And this passage then builds onto that. When you come into a passage, it's good to have the big picture in mind. And John tells us in John chapter 20 why he's written. He says he's written this whole book so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. So this passage should hope to grow our belief so that we might have life, true life, full life in his name. So once you've prayed, then I encourage you to read through the passage a number of times. And as I read through this passage, a couple of things jump out. Again, like last time, there is this word remain that comes. Now remain in my love. Remain, remain, remain. It's there a couple of times. Interestingly, this word in verse 16, where it says that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, that word is the same word as remain. This is fruit that will remain, fruit that will abide. And Jesus wants us to be fruitful. In order to be fruitful, we need to remain. So that idea that comes up a lot in the first few verses comes through a bit in this passage too. But as you read through, there's one word that jumps out more than any of the others. And it's this word love. Love comes all over this passage. And when, again, if you notice this type of repetition in a passage like this, then it's telling you that Jesus is telling us something specifically about love. He wants us to see that, he wants us to learn something about love in this passage. So we've got to start asking the question, so what is Jesus wanting me to see about love? Before we answer that, a few other things that get repeated. We see this idea of commands. Now that's a word that men in our world don't like. We live in an anti-authority world. People don't like this idea of commands, but Jesus is saying here that obeying his commands, keeping his commands is vital if we are going to remain in his love. There's also a couple of other repeated ideas. We see this, Jesus calls them friends. There's this deep love between Jesus and his disciples. They're no longer his servants, he says, but now his friends. There's a deep, intimate connection between them. There's also an idea, you did not choose me, but I chose you. And then I think another key thing that's repeated just in one verse, here in verse 11, this is so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. Jesus wants us to know where true joy is found. And I think this is quite important in our world that is searching for happiness. Jesus is saying, I'm going to tell you now where true happiness is found. The joy that is in me, I want that joy to be in you. And I think that this joy is vitally linked to this idea of love that comes up. So in verse 9 he says, as the Father has loved me. This love between God the Father and God the Son is an always and forever love. It's been there since the beginning. It's deep and real. And Jesus is saying, that is the love that's in him. And he's saying, and I've loved you with that love. And for Jesus, that deep love between him and his Father is what makes him joyful. All of us as relational beings know that when there is this deep love, when we are the objects of someone's love, it does bring great joy to us. That is something that we should want God's created us to rejoice in his creation, to rejoice in his love. And so Jesus says he's told us all this so that we may have joy, so that his joy may be in us, and that our joy may be full or complete. Now, in this passage, there is this interesting connection between love and keeping commands, saying, so have I loved you, now remain in my love. How do we remain in Jesus' love? Well, if you keep my commands, you will remain in my love. So Jesus is saying, if you want to stay connected, as he's been speaking about in the previous section, about him being the vine, us being the branches, if we want to remain connected, and if we want our love, the deep love that is between Jesus and us, to grow and flourish, we are to keep his commands. Jesus' commands are there for our good. They are not bad things. His commands are good things. Now, this is something that our world struggles with. As I said, our world doesn't like commands, but Jesus is saying that his commands are for our good, so that we can know how to live his way in his world for his glory. And I think the two specific commands that come out in this passage that you need to take note of, the first one is here, now remain in my love, at the end of verse 10. That's the first command. Jesus is saying, remain in my love. Stay there. Don't depart. Abide in my love. There's a deep dependence there. And he goes on in verse 13 to spell out how glorious his love for us is. This is a verse that we really need to take note of in this passage. It says here, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Now, this is the key to understanding this love that we are to remain in. It is the self-sacrificial love that Jesus has shown to us. He is the one who ultimately laid down his life, not just for his friends, but for his enemies. People like us who were sinners, rebels against him. He laid down his life for us. Paul marvels at this truth in Romans chapter 5, if you want to cross-reference that. Not only were we not Christ's friends, but we were ungodly, unrighteous, and yet while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. That is the love that we are to remain in. And that love should bring us great joy. As objects of wrath, we've been brought into the family, grafted into the vine. We are the objects of Jesus' love. And so Jesus commands, firstly, remain in my love. But then the second command comes up twice. He says, my command is this, love each other as I have loved you. And again, right at the end, this is my command, love each other. So he starts, remain in my love, but then flowing out of that, love each other as I have loved you. With that same kind of self-sacrificial love. That's the love that we are to show to each other. And that is an all-in love. A love that knows each other deeply and intimately. A love that shares our lives. It's not a love that is shallow. It's not just a I see you once on a Sunday kind of love. This is a love that knows each other deeply and wants to serve each other, is willing to lay down our lives for each other. There are phenomenal truths that come out of this passage telling us the type of love that we ought to show to one another, and that should impact us hugely as Jesus' followers. Loved by him, remain in his love. Loved by him, show that love to others. Love each other as I have loved you. And you might then ask, why? What's the point of all this? Well, Jesus says in verse 16, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that, we've got a purpose statement there, so that you might go and bear fruit, and so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. Jesus wants us to be fruitful. And I think this links back to verse 8. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit. So there we've got that bear fruit idea coming up twice. I think holding the passage together. Why do we love? Well, it's because we want to bear fruit. We want to show that we are disciples of Jesus. And we want to do that because this brings glory to God our Father. And just two chapters earlier in John 13, Jesus again commanded us to love each other. And he said, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. We want the world to know that we are disciples of Jesus. And that will happen if we remain in his love and as we love each other as he has loved us. So it's a great passage. I encourage you to go dig in deeper. There's more to it. I hope that I've given you a start to start digging into this wonderful passage. And then let's go live it out. Let's remain in his love as his word remains in us. And as we remain in his love, let's love each other so that the world will know that we are his disciples. I pray that you'll have a great time looking at this passage. God bless.